audience. Hello, Will. Let's see where James. Oh, there he is. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Happy Thursday. It's a beautiful day here in New York City. Audience, I'm going to do a quick introduction in here. And while I do that, go ahead into the chat and tell us where you're calling from. We love to hear where you are. As I said, New York City. And we are here today to talk about modern lead scoring. Such a great topic. And I have great speakers. So, audience, you're in for a treat. My name is Eduardo. I am a community events manager at Modern Sales Pros. And for those of you not familiar with Modern Sales Pros, we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. And our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they will struggle to solve on their own and to help them see around corners they might not know about. And we do that through live events like this one you're about to experience with James and Will. We have a robust online forum where you can go and ask any questions and also help your sales leaders answering their questions. We have quarterly summit. I'm going to talk about the October summit coming up in a little bit. And we also have in-person events, which is very, very exciting. If you're not part of the MSP community yet, you will receive an email right after this event inviting you to join. And as I mentioned, we have the summits. James is going to be one of our speakers. I'm going to drop a link into the chat right now so everyone can get registered and listen to James again speaking at the summit. But you can also hear from sales leaders at Gong, Gainsight, Specket, Sales Loft, Cowboy Ventures, and so much more. It's a 3 days filled with great knowledge. But enough about other events. Let's talk about this one. I have a little bit of housekeeping notes in here. So first of all, this event is being recorded, so all the knowledge James and we will drop on you today, you will have access to it anytime you need in the future, and also some amazing key takeaways. And I was talking with both speakers. It's Thursday. They're feeling like a little bit low energy to get through the week. So let's ask them a lot of questions using the chat or the Q&A function on your right-hand side. We also have two polls scheduled for today, so be sure to participate. We want to hear from you, audience, to make the content more aligned to what you need to know and your problems here. So, as I said, I have two great speakers here. I'm going to pass the mic to James. James will be our moderator for today. So, James, you can take it from here, and I'll be back later for some outro notes.
Excellent. Thank you, Eduardo. And thanks again to the Modern Sales Pro community. We always enjoy being here with this group. It's always lively and fun. So thanks for showing up, and thanks to Will for joining me today in this discussion. We're going to get into introducing ourselves in just a moment. But in terms of the discussion today, really it is about moving from, frankly, kind of an old school approach to lead scoring to what we call modern lead scoring, and the opportunity in front of us and how important this is, especially in this type of difficult economy, right? So we're going to talk about what that means, how it works, what the value is. It's very practical, very achievable, right? This is something that I think is really easy for teams to achieve with just a little bit of effort working together, and the value is again extremely high. And I'm always pretty surprised as we work with our 800 to 1,000 customers, how few have actually taken the time to implement this modern lead scoring technique. Will introduce himself in a moment, but he is a user, a consumer of this, and a great seller himself. Will, talk about let's have a little moment of zen here, right, on a Thursday morning, right?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this topic because I think leads are fantastic, but timing is more important. And often when we're just using traditional lead scoring methods, we really don't know enough about the timing and enough about the situation. And so today I'm super excited about sharing with people like how to actually do this in the modern way, in the modern approach. For me, one of like my core values is to help people change their financial futures by empowering them to sell better. And this is one of the best techniques I have found over the last 7 years of consulting to hundreds of sellers on like how to actually hit quota, how to hit your numbers, and how to accelerate growth. So this is going to be super, super exciting today.
Cool. And as we jump in, want to start with our first poll here. Eduardo, if you want to bring that up for us. So you can fill out this poll while we're talking. I'm going to introduce myself. I'll then have Will introduce himself, and we'll do a quick poll here and see if people are leaning in and paying attention. This is a test of are you paying attention and listening? This is our test. So James Lamberti, I'm the CMO here of SalesIntel. Joined over a year ago. If you're not familiar with SalesIntel, quite candidly, we are really the only viable competitor out there to ZoomInfo in terms of the quality and comprehensive data we possess. And we do, three things really, really well. Number one, we have the account data to help you define your ICP and target the right accounts, comprehensive account information. We then have multiple signals of intent data that allow you to know who is in market at this moment, directly applicable to red hot leads. We then give you the contact data you need, including mobiles and verified emails to reach them. And we are really proud of our customer service. So I'll leave our intro at that. And Will, tell us a little bit about you and Maestro Group. And thank you for joining us, my man.
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited. My name is Will Fuentes. I'm the managing partner and founder of the Maestro Group. We really focus on the science of higher sales. And so what that means to you is that we teach you how people make decisions and the things that you do as a seller or that your sellers do that prevent them from getting the best outcomes. We have a whole research and development team. Our chief learning officer is getting his master's from the Harvard Extension School. And all of the stuff that we teach is based in academic, scientific research on behavioral psychology and industrial organizational psychology. So it's not only like what to do, but the why behind that stuff works. And really for us, the focus is to help people, individuals, reach their financial goals by like driving better outcomes.
Awesome. So jumping into the topic, ask yourself this question, right? And look at this data for a moment and really be honest, right? Are you old school or new school in how you route and score leads, right? And when I say old school, really what we're talking about is maybe you certainly understand the titles and the people or personas that make up your buying audience, right? And then oftentimes you might have a marketing activity score. If you've got a relatively sophisticated RevOps layer, a relatively sophisticated marketing team, you might have some sort of MQL scoring process based on our contacts and leads engaging with your marketing. And when they're routed, right? So this is kind of a 5-10 year ago concept. Since then, the evolution of lead scoring has now moved from a reactive reality, which is kind of on that old school side of this chart, to a much more proactive state, where there is so much data, right? So much quantification and knowledge that can be brought into this process that can easily be deployed and used to route leads, right? The end goal is that every morning, right, your sellers arrive, open up their Salesforce instance, and they see ranked, scored, what accounts, what people they should be targeting. Doing it with technographic information, firmographic information, what we call the ICP fit score, not just people, but the accounts that define your target. And then the buyer intent scores, right? Multiple signals of intention that speak directly to timing, right? So this is where I'll jump to a poll, right, real quick here to ask you all honestly, like, which of these data sets are you actually using, right, today, right? Marketing activity, firmographics, technographics, buyer intent, and frankly, some of you may not even have this type of model set up, right? And if you don't, we can talk about that. So love for you to jump in, Eduardo, and issue that poll for folks. I guess we should show the result of the other one as well. But yeah, fill this out. Appreciate that. What did we get on the results of the other?
Looks like we got one vote there, James.
Yeah,
on the other one. So,
Yeah.
so it seems like we didn't ask the question of what they encounter when they lose deals with their leads.
All right. Well, we'll have to get this group to lean in a little more. 5 of you are paying attention. I love that. So let's jump back into the to the deck here. Oops, sorry, I lost my spot. So Will, tell me a little bit about when what you've observed when people are using these old school models or no model of R, what is the impact of that reality?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is this, is that like our most precious commodity is going to be time. And our seller's time is incredibly valuable, right? If you do the calculations and everything else in terms of how much selling time they actually have, given everything else that's going on, it becomes even that much more valuable. And often when people are using old school models, they're talking to the wrong company, the wrong people at the wrong time. And so that really leads to incredibly low sales efficiency scores. They're often in a reactive mode. They're much slower to understand whether someone is in the buying cycle or not. And even if they are the right ICP, I recently ran across a client, that their sellers were complaining that the majority of the leads they were getting was for an integration that they were deprecating out in 90 days. So think about that, right? Marketing is targeting these companies, and they're no longer going to be able to service them anyway. And so they're having these conversations, they're taking these leads, they're excited. These are big name companies, all of a sudden to find out, well, we're actually not going to support the integration that allows us to sell to them. And so this happens quite a bit, right? Because people just don't have this modern way of looking at like how well does this organization fit and how well do they fit in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, which is sell to them. So those intent signals. And so this often leads to just this really poor alignment. And quite honestly, we've worked with 150 companies over the last like 5 years. And often what we find is that there's not only just a misalignment, just in general within like sales and marketing, but just also there's this conflict that happens because people are thinking that, hey, marketing's delivering, thinks they're delivering great leads, sales is saying they're not good enough, but they
Yeah.
can't really pinpoint why. And so, this is what we see. And so obviously a grossly inefficient go to market strategy and then poor ROI on the investments,
Yep.
not
Yep.
only just
Exactly.
people, but tech.
And it's amazing to me how many companies are still in this situation, right? So when we talk about this scoring model, a modern lead scoring model, this is really what it looks like, right? The marketing activity, the old school approach to engagement is super important, but it sits beneath your knowledge of your ICP, right? The people that you know you need to be engaging at all levels. Will's going to talk about that later. And the intent fit score, which is a huge opportunity, right? So those three quantified dimensions at the account and the contact level. When I say account fit score, I'm talking about the firmographics, right? What part of the world can you effectively sell into, right? What types of industries, certain verticals are going to be really a good fit, others were not. You need to leverage that information. Certain size companies, those are the obvious signals that you might be using. Less obvious might be what we call technographics, technology install data, right? Especially in a SaaS world like many of us live in, those integrations that Will just described, those technology signals are incredibly vital, right? So in the case of SalesIntel, drinking our own champagne, I know if I'm dealing with a prospect that has some level of sophistication, a marketing automation platform, right? Marketo or HubSpot, certainly a Salesforce, maybe a SalesLoft or an Outreach. Those three types of technologies, which you can track, I can see, right, are a good sign to me that this is a team that's going to be sophisticated enough to value my B2B data, right? So it makes sense, but it's so often missing as a foundation. Then you layer on the intent, right, that Will's talking about. And now you've got another signal that is about the timing, right? This is the struggle, is the timing. Marketing can drive a very high quality lead that is in your ICP that has the right persona. But if the timing isn't there, you should be nurturing them, building brand, adding value, waiting for that moment, knowing that when the buying stage comes back, they'll be sent in or float into your sales process at that time when it's efficient to do so. And then finally, at the far right, that marketing activity, of course, that matters a ton, right? And when you see all these things firing, that's your red hot lead, right? And you got to be able to route that and get into the sales, speed to lead. So, we'll talk a little bit about this, setting up these dashboards. I mean, we know no team, unless they're extremely lucky, is always living in that red hot sector, right? But this concept of knowing the ICP and prioritizing how the prospecting, working back down, is, I think, really important in a lot of what you teach, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And so, a lot of this stuff, what we're talking to companies about is really like digging into the data to really understand, right? Because what we want them to do is to maximize, again, their most precious commodity, which is the time of their sellers. And
Yeah.
so, the red hot marketing activity stuff is really, really important, right? But without understanding, like, can I actually sell to these people? Do they really matter to me? And I say that like not glibly. I mean seriously. Do they really matter? Right? Is really important because otherwise you're having a lot of conversations that just aren't going to lead to anywhere. And then to me, the intent data is really where like I want my people to live. Right? It's like, hey, they filled out a demo room, they've done all this stuff, but there's a lot of intent going behind this. Well, now I know that there's some momentum within the organization, and a seller knows, right? Sales is physics, right? An object in motion stays in no motion. An object at rest, has a tendency to stay at rest. And we say a sale in motion stays in motion. And so, what you really want is to see where the momentum is internally, right? And then being able to go back and start to map based on the persona fit scores. I mean, I think like most organizations look at that red hot and say, "Yep, this is ready. Let's go." But there's so much more that comes underneath that. And if you're not thinking about it holistically, again, you you have a tendency to run into a very inefficient sales process that leads to a couple of things, right? Longer sales cycles, so things come into your pipeline. So if you're a director of sales, if you're a VP of sales, you're a CRO, they're going to be measuring you right on your average sales cycle. And some of these things are staying in there because they might fit, but the intent isn't there, right? So we haven't necessarily we've qualified them as an opportunity, but they're not really there yet, right? Number two, right, is your win rates, is that like oftentimes you're going to end up closing out on some of these that actually weren't real opportunities to begin with. And so, we take this form submission as like, okay, great. Yep, this is an opportunity, but not necessarily.
Yeah.
And so all of these things really matter, not just from a performance standpoint, but also from your own personal kind of metrics and KPIs that you're being measured to.
Yeah. And I think the key of moving from this reactive to proactive state is that marketing activity score into that intent fit score and ICP definition on the left side of this chart, right? Not again, very few teams are going to get leads coming in that red hot spot, right? You're going to have to augment. You're going to have to do some prospecting. You're going to have to do some outbounding. But if that activity can be where you've got fit and you're seeing intent, even if the marketing activity is not there, that's the movement from reactive to proactive. And I can't impress upon this audience enough how easy it is to have this data start to fire in your systems, right? That's where we're at as a modern team. And if your competitors are doing this, guess what? They're getting to leads before you are,
Hey,
right? And
James,
that's really the point.
can I
Yep.
jump in here really quickly?
Yep.
Only because like our work runs the gamut from organizations that are just starting, founders of an amazing idea, all the way to massive enterprises. And what I find is that the founders at the beginning stage, they really think about the firmographics, the technographics, the persona. They like this proactive scoring dimension, right? Because they have such limited bandwidth about what they can and can't do. And so, like in the initial stages of companies that now we know and love that are massive, these founders were just so thoughtful about where they were spending their selling time,
Yeah.
right? Because they also had to build, they had to do all of this other stuff. And
Yeah.
as organizations grow, we have a tendency to move away from the foundational pieces. And that's what I love, like in terms of how this is defined, because that really is the foundation of great salesmanship.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, just to bring this to life for y'all, this is real data, right? So obviously at SalesIntel, one of the first things I did when I joined is drank my own champagne, right? I deployed these exact concepts. And I was able to, I know exactly the size of my market, all 26,324 companies that are close to an $800 million addressable market right now for me. And when I'm playing in that space with these definitions, my win rates are 44% higher. This is all the data that Will described, right? My ACVs are 1.5, my retention's 1.5, my LTV is 3x, right? So just by taking the same team and the same amount of selling time and deploying it into this focused area, like you did when you were a founder, the efficiency just skyrockets for your team. So this is really what we're talking about. And then, the other concept here
I'm
is it's
sorry,
not
James,
just
can you go back? Because I
sure.
know we have a lot of leaders, sales leaders on here, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of them are being tasked with growing their business. And so I often come into organizations after someone has made a massive investment in the business, right? And they're asking, like, how do we get return on that investment? Well, how do we crank up sales? And so this is some of the first initial work that I do with companies is figuring out who the best people to talk to and sell to, right? The best companies that lead to higher win rates and ACVs. And so I just from doing simple spreadsheets and math can figure out, man, okay, I'm tasked with growing this 2x. I can get 2/3 of the way there if I can identify just and get in front of these type of buyers, these type of companies, right? That 44% higher win rate is massive. I mean, if you're winning at 32%, a 44% win rate, all of a sudden on those companies, you're over 44% now. You're close to 50% win on those. That 53% ACV, think about that. Like a dollar in is now a dollar 50 in. That is so big in terms of when you're trying to accomplish your goals. And if you're thinking about moving your organic growth metrics, which are always going to be your win rates, your ACV, right, and your sales cycle, right, you can really affect the win rates and the ACV by targeting correctly and understanding that and using this type of model that we're talking about. That's really where the growth happens. The people become these super hyper focused CROs that really understand and can drive their team and say, hey, like this is gold and let's go close it.
And Will, of course, before I get to the next slide, I'll help you with this one. People buy, accounts don't, right? It's
That's
all
right.
about people. So we can't forget about the people.
That's right.
So, talk about this concept as well. But we have this persona fit score, right? This is another dimension. The people matter, right? And there's often multiple buying centers, often multiple levels of buyers. So again, I love some of the philosophy you bring to this concept on top of the account ICP definition and intent data.
That's right. That's right. And you absolutely said it perfectly, right? And we tell people all the time. And remember when we started this, I said we really focus on how people make decisions, not how organizations make decisions, but how people make decisions and how you can build trust and you can build credibility. But understanding what that process is going to look like, who's going to be involved, and understanding who they are as people, not as titles, is really, really important for two reasons. Number one is when you're doing an opportunity plan, you can start to think about when do I get Ronnie into this decision? When do I bring in Sam? Right? Megan is going to be, my coach here, or she's my point of contact, but like, how do I help her think about bringing all the influencers together? And what's the information that I can give to her that she can share with others, knowing who she has to share it with and who they might be? This, like understanding, like, yes, that ICP is so important because not only can you start to affect how the information is shared, but when it's shared. And by really identifying for Megan, in this case, I'm using her as the example here, right? Hey, Ronnie's going to need to be involved. Like, what are some of the things that, you've worked on with him in the past and understanding really the depth of that relationship when you're interacting, but knowing that that's how you should be interacting is super important.
Yeah,
And for me, we talk about this all of the time with people.
Yeah, and we're going to you're going to go deeper on the account mapping
Yeah.
side of it in a little later. So, yeah, that's really the heart of it. Now, if I step back for a minute and just, I'm going to get a little bit, marketing guy on you, and then Will make it real since you're all sellers. But behind the scenes, right, what your marketing partners should be doing from the scoring perspective, or your RevOps leaders should be doing, right? I know there's a couple RevOps folks listening in. You'll understand this concept, right? This is how we've set it up, right? And I've got these two axes: the proactive fit score going up the left axis, and then the marketing activity going along the horizontal axis. So if I see that perfect red hot moment, right? Perfect fit, right persona, lots of activity. Of course, that's going to be what surfaces first and is red hot to your team. The key to efficiency from a prospecting and sales perspective is where do you go next, right? Your sales team's not going to live all day in those red leads. We know you're not. You're going to have, we just came out of July and August. It's horrible, right? November, December, the seasonality is crazy. Our team might be living in that red zone, but what about the other 10 months of the year, right? So it's what you do with that time at that moment as a seller and as a prospector that really matters. And your marketing team can help set that up for you and make it super easy so that your sellers come in, open up the CRM in the morning when they start their day, and they see clear the red hot ones that are there, but they're going to work those or keep working the ones that are live. Where do they go next, right? You should be sending them and scoring those leads in that upper left quadrant, right? The fit is great. They may not have marketing activity yet. You may not see the old school MQL, but that's where the outbounding, the prospecting should be occurring. You want to avoid that inefficient activity at the bottom, right? And it can actually work against you, to Will's point earlier. It can work against you if you're overly focused on high activity leads, right? Bottom right, that aren't a good fit. Like I've seen sellers waste so many cycles on a lead that is very hard to convert. The ACV is really low. Those types of leads will dangle you for weeks or months, and they'll give you hope, but then won't deliver any value. So you got to have the discipline as a sales team. So, Will, enough ivory tower marketing guy. Let me hand it to a real sellers in the trenches, and really it ends up, something like this when you're coaching your sales team.
Yeah, 100%, right? So we're looking at that green band. We're focused on that green band, right? We're making sure, yeah, hey, the revenue is right, the company size is right, right? The marketing activity, the intent, all of that sits right in here, and we've got some really great focus. But like you said, James, like not everything is a perfect world, and sales is far from it. And so often there's some activity there in the green that keeps our people busy. But what do they do next? Often they fall into the red side. They literally fall into the beware or DQ side, right? They just are over there. They enjoy it for whatever reason. They're having conversations, but it's not going anywhere. And what we teach people is like, let's look at that yellow band and let's think about, how do we engage them as sellers? What are some information that we can do? How do we thoughtfully nurture them? How do we use, and I'm going to now plug you guys, how do we use SalesIntel to think about growing that buying center and getting information to others? Because eventually we know they can fall into that green band. And this is why this idea in terms of just this modern approach is so important, because with this additional information and data, it again allows you to take the time that you have to be able to start to nurture, so that, hey, right, you're absolutely right. I tell people right now, it's 9/28. There's 6 weeks of selling left, right? There's 6 weeks of selling left. So what is everyone going to be doing the final 6 weeks of the year, right? They should be living in that yellow band, getting them set up for January, February to hit like the ground running in Q1. And without the right tools that give you the right information, it is incredibly difficult to do that. I mean, you're just scattershotting, shotgunning, approaching it.
So really beware of that red zone. It's activity feels good, right? I actually did walk a mile. I was a seller before I was a marketer. So the red feels good sometimes as a young professional in sales, right? The harder work, but the greater value is when you're prospecting is out in that yellow zone. So speaking of that yellow zone, when we talk about intent, right? Again, this is actually quantifying intent. You're drinking our own champagne, right? If you're me, I've got some great signals to feed off of, right? Zoom in for alternative, right? I don't know, B2B intelligence providers, right? There's great intent signals I can use. So you got to find and test your way toward signals that make sense for your business. And I know that that's not trivial, but when you do that, this is the sweet spot you can get to. Like when you're talking about this yellow zone back here that Will and I were describing, right? With the data, you can know at this moment, this week, updated every week, here's, in my case, the 15% of market that's in market right now. It's 135 million that I see are in market right now. Those leads I prospect to. Those leads my marketing team will target with the budget we've got on paid advertising. Can make a huge difference to your performance, and it's sitting right there. The data is right there for you. Not just our data, but lots of other intent signals in market. So the key to all this, though, and Will, this is where I think I'm going to have you dig back in here, is something that sellers, it's I'll say it's scattershot how well they do this, but account mapping.
Yeah, I mean, the hard work is the hard work, right? And so account mapping is one of those things. It feels good to be able to talk to someone like a Dab who's super excited about talking to you, and you have a lot of good conversations, a lot of demo. But unless you're mapping that account and understanding that Megan and Mark are going to be really important to the decision making, you're not really moving the deal forward. You're actually starting to atrophy that deal. And so, really thinking about the individuals that are going to be involved and how do you get to them, and how do you guide perhaps Deb, who doesn't know that all these parties are going to be involved. But by giving her that information and coaching her along becomes really important. And so when we teach people like the opportunity mapping or the dossier form, which is like this really, by the way, James, this is unplanned, but I don't, I didn't tell you this. We have this dossier format where people start to
Yep.
map the account, and the technographic information is so important in terms of that dossier, right? The technology that they have and understanding, like, what do their stacks look like, right? Like, and it can, and really smart sellers actually, can start to interpret that data, the technographic data, to understand the personality of the organization, right?
Yeah.
They have a lot of new tech. Oh man, these people might be willing to take a shot on a
Yeah.
newer technology, on a startup,
Yeah.
on whatever it may be. If it's a lot of legacy technology, well, guess what?
Yeah.
Really smart seller is going to say this is going to be a tough sell, and I'm going to have to really climb along a big hill here. But the account mapping stuff. Here's the thing: an amazing seller is going to figure out how to do this, regardless of what you do for them, for him or her. They will figure it out. The majority of sellers, which are most of us, including myself, we need help. We need technology to help us figure out how to do this correctly. Why? Because it's a lot of hard work. And so being able to start to map, okay, Deb to Megan to Mark, and then increasing those buying centers, as you know, and mapping that organization becomes really important in terms of how you as a leader can guide the team, right? So if I'm coaching you, James, I might say, this is great, but hey, Sarah, is the sales team lead. She's going to be involved in this decision. Like, have you talked to Deb about when she's going to approach her, how often they meet?
Yeah.
That's a great coaching point. Imagine now the power that you've given your salesperson, right? Or when they proactively come to you and say, hey, I've identified Cody. So my next step with Deb is to have her get Cody into the room with us. That's where like those win rates really skyrocket. That's when that ACV skyrockets. And by the way, that's when your sales cycle shrinks because you're not surprised that Cody's showing up. You've mapped the account. Your team knows it. And so they're proactive. Remember that word proactive that you started with. They're proactive in their approach.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, I know you teach this a lot, and again, pointing a shameless plug for SalesIntel, but the ROD support that we provide is crucial here if you're not aware of that. But we have 2,000 people that'll do research on demand where you, as a seller, right through the software, you'll instruct that army of people to go find the people you need in the account, in addition to the conversations and the good selling coaching you've got. So I just, I think that's important.
By the way, you can pat yourself on the back a little bit more for that. This is one of the features when people are asking me around like, why I like SalesIntel. This again, I'm all about sales efficiency and sales time efficiency. If I can offset some, high value work to someone that actually doesn't require high skill, in terms of like, yes, I get that your people are very skilled, but what I'm saying is I would rather have my sellers talking and closing and demoing and negotiating than having them, trying to find someone, right? And so this is great. This is like that like easy button that exists, right? We talk about that commercial easy from Staples. This is that button. And I love the research on demand feature. It's one of the things that I tell people all the time around SalesIntel, like you have to take advantage of it if you have it in your stack.
Yeah, it's powerful for this mapping capability. So I want to land this here in the last few minutes, and then we'll take some questions if they're out there. The other thing that modern lead scoring and routing does is it aligns the entire go-to-market team, right? I mean, one of the things I'm really a big proponent of describing is like, you don't have a marketing problem, you don't have a sales problem, you got a go-to-market problem, right? And the go-to-market problem is shared. It's a shared experience. We all want to bring it, get better at it. And your CFO and your CEO of course, they have a stake in this. But by setting up this modern lead scoring and routing process, you bring a level of clarity and alignment to the team that is really empowering. It brings a ton of objectivity. And your conversations are not finger pointing, right? You know what a quality lead is when marketing sends it over. You know if the timing is right or not. You send it back. I'll nurture it, right? Before I send it back to Will's team, right? The point is the objectivity and the alignment of this structured approach to modern lead scoring is in its own right a whole nother level of efficiency and teamwork that is an offshoot of it. So, Will, I don't know if you want to talk any more
I
about
was going to
this.
say, there's one other thing here too for the majority of our audience, right? That do have to talk about growth, and they do have to talk about their plans for next year and revenue acceleration and all that good stuff, right? This is, to me, is super important in terms of aligning the boards or your CEO's expectations to what actually can be accomplished by really understanding who is in market and who are our best customers, and who can we service, right? And I think often we put these numbers out there that we want to achieve, and yes, we could achieve in a perfect world, but again, it's not a perfect world. There's only a certain amount that are actually in that sellable, addressable market that are actually in market, and to have the data behind that, to be able to talk to it, to be able to plan around it in terms of how you're going to hire, or perhaps where you're going to deploy some of your assets, is incredibly important. And some of the best sales leaders that I've seen in front of boards or in front of their CEOs really take this data to really map it out for them and just give them that picture that this is reality and this is how we're going to get there.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I think I joined a little over a year ago, right? And it was amazing to me that SalesIntel wasn't actually drinking its own champagne. We had this gold mine, we weren't using it. Your team had just trained our sales team in, I think, May or June, right before I joined. Yeah. So we had your sales process, your dossier work, right? Your consultation. I came in, set up this modern lead scoring, and this is the type of performance we've seen, right? And we've actually maintained the same cost structure, right? We're all about efficiency. All of us are all about efficiency. Right. So while my overall lead composition hasn't changed, I'm mostly dealing with organic content marketing, lead flow, SEO. I get some SEM, but we're not the size of company that's spending millions of dollars to highly target leads. So my composition's been the same, but the performance, and it's gone up, right? The performance that the team is getting, having deployed your Maestro's consultation and deployed this modern lead scoring, is astronomical, right? We're literally, as we sit year over year today, over 2x more efficient as a company, same dollar per dollar. So it really is powerful when you actually commit to this. Go back to your days of being that founder alone in the room and how you had to discipline your time, take that knowledge, deploy it at scale, even if you're an enterprise. Anything to finish up on here?
Yeah, I was going to say what's really important here is that we keep talking about efficiency and how much more efficient we can get, right? But if you think about, the ability to have another salesperson or another two salespeople just by being smarter about this, how incredible that can be, right? Or additional days, right? If your competitor's operating at a 24-hour pace, right, and you are at a 32-hour pace, think about it, that's 33% more. That's, you're getting all of that. That's what that efficiency metric means.
Yeah.
Right. And that to me is one of the most incredible things about what you've done over there is the ability to give people a third more time to sell. That's really what that means.
Yeah. And pointing them in the right direction. Everyone can do it, right? It's really amazing what we're capable of doing if we work together with data at the core. So listen, really have enjoyed the conversation. Well, I think we might take a few questions here. There's a ton of knowledge you can get thought leadership from us. I know Maestro Group as well has all kinds of education freely available. So I would really recommend you check out both companies and just educate yourself more. We're constantly out there trying to have these types of conversations. And then I will share before we drop the Q&A, we have an amazing offer through the end of the year, right? So I know you're probably sitting there wondering, I would love to have this data. Well, you can get it. It's called a ticking clock offer. Right. If you sign now, you get the data for free through the end of the year, all through Q4, and don't start paying until January. So this is a really compelling offer if you're thinking about a B2B intelligence provider, thinking about switching from ZoomInfo, this offer's out there for you. You can take me up on it. So Q&A. I know I've got one question that I know I get all the time I'll mention, but Eduardo, I don't know if there's some questions out there today, but
Yeah, there are a few questions.
Cool. Let's do it.
All right, are you ready? So let's start with David. David is asking, discuss how customer segmentation impacts the more modern lead scoring.
I love it. Yeah. So I've dealt with this actually, and I didn't want to overly complicate the conversation, but we will literally repeat the entire procedure by segment, right? So if you're an enterprise company, right, and you might be opening up brand new markets, right? Every time you open up a brand new market or every time you open up a brand new segment, we will literally repeat these definitions because that segment's going to be different people, different technographics, different firmographics. So we kept it really simple today because really SalesIntel is of a size where we're really focused on one core segment that you saw. But for enterprises that we work with, they'll do this for 3, 5, 7, 8, 10 segments. And within their instance of the marketing automation platform or CRM, they'll just note the segment and they'll have different logic built around each of those. That's the type of sophistication you can achieve very, very easily. So quick answer is you can do this by segment and you absolutely should. I don't know, Will, if you want to add to that, but that's how I think about it.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good question, though.
Thank you, David, for the question. Let me see. There is one more here. There are 3 more questions. Elizabeth is asking, thanks for the presentation. What did you mean by web resolution as intent metric?
Sorry, repeat that, Eduardo. What resolution?
Web resolution as intent metric.
Oh, yeah. That is the there's a feature that we have. Others have it as well, right? Most players in the space will have this capability, where someone who anonymously lands on your website will be able to resolve what company they're from and feed that back into your lead routing. That's for sure intent, right? If you see a company visit your website, they're probably researching. If they're in that ICP, that's a huge form of intent. You should be jumping on that lead. So that web resolution is that capability, that feature. We call it visitor intel. It takes you 5 minutes to deploy, and you score your leads that way. Will, you probably use that all the time?
I use it on opportunities. Right? I use it on opportunities, right, to see if I'm gaining momentum in an organization. Right. So if I don't have like the account completely mapped and I'm trying to figure out, like, are they actually talking to people? I know this is a large enterprise. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to have their hands in this pot. That to me is one of the signals where I'm like, okay, I'm gaining ground because, outside of the docs I've sent, outside of the email opens and all this, this is one of the strongest signals. It's like I sent an email yesterday with a lot of assets and all of a sudden, like I'm seeing all this visit, like that is incredibly important. So that's where I'll use it. If you can't tell, I'm a sales guy. I'm all about closing deals, right? Like I'm like literally that's all I'm thinking about here.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I'm routing the leads to you because of that from the marketing perspective, and then Will's using it as a technique to know, am I penetrating? Is this a real deal?
Yep.
So it's
all
cool.
Right. We have one more from Hank. Could you please explain a little more how we can calculate intent fit scores?
Yeah, look, we started very simply, right? And again, we have the luxury of having pretty clear and obvious intent signals. So in our case, if we saw something like B2B intelligence provider or like ZoomInfo alternative, when we see that signal in our data, we'll give that a very high score, right? And we'll put that right in the red hot category because that's such clear intent. Someone's researching for an alternative in market, or they want to research the competition in the space. We need to be proactive. We need to get ahead of competitors. So we'll typically, like you probably have scoring, historically scored things on a MQL basis, and maybe a form fill would be like an instant route. That's the type of score we'll give intent. And then as we have evolved over time, there are other signals that aren't quite as strong that get a lower score. So it's the same concept as your other scoring. The key that you all have to take away is you've got to take a little time to research these topics, research these signals, figure out the ones that really work for your business, because it's not always super obvious. Sometimes you got to take a little time, do a little testing, be a little patient. But when you figure out those signals that work, it's a gold mine. It moves you up into a much better place very quickly. So yeah, Will, go ahead. I know you
So
want
it's
to add
interesting,
something.
James. You talk about Zoom info competitor for you guys. Okay, that's pretty clear, right? That like that's the intent there. And
Yeah.
I work with a lot of companies that's really difficult. As a sales leader, one of the things that you can do is actually call your prospects, call your that are engaged with your sellers or even customers today, and ask them, hey, like how did you find us? What were you searching for? What were you looking for? And that's really going to help set up that intent data quite a bit. And you can help your marketing team out that way as well. And to your point, James, like often it is not what you think it is.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's great. Do research with your existing customers you close. Just ask them. Have your CS team ask. That's awesome advice, right? And yeah, I got to do that. I got to when this call ends, I'm going to go do that.
Yeah, there's a nugget for you. Glad I was
Sending
there's your Christmas present.
Yeah.
sending an email to the CS team right now. We have a question here that aligns a little bit with what you're saying, Will. Chriselle is asking, what is the best process for nurturing leads before they arrive to sales? How does the best sync between email marketing and sales look like?
Will, you want to talk about this? I have some thoughts, but anything jump to your mind? I
Go
mean,
ahead, and James, I'll fill in as you go. And I
so
know, I
it,
think I know where you're going.
yeah, it comes back to this slide for me, right? It's all about capacity, right? How many sellers do you have? What's the capacity of sales? If they've got capacity, right, then, and let's just say seasonally, right, like July and August, I just told you, I had a lot of sellers that were idle from the red hot perspective during that time, but I have the capacity because I need them in Q4, right, where they're going to be getting all kinds of inbound. So what did I do during this time frame? I moved, you know, to the left side of that curve, and I started to send more of those leads to sales because they had capacity. And I'd rather have a human being with a personal touch deploying some of Will's techniques, touching those accounts. And then when it gets insanely busy again, I'll pull that back, right? I'll pull it back into marketing and really focus on those red hot ones. So this can ebb and flow a little bit, but it really amounts to what capacity is available to you on the sales side, and those ICP leads, those high quality, high fit score leads, work those in a thoughtful way, with people when you can. And the last comment I'll make here is, when it comes to sales capacity, you should think about your lead scoring model as a way to judge the capacity you need. You can overspend in outbound sales so easily. It's the number one way to crush your P&L. Overhire on the sales side, overhire on the BDR side. Cold prospecting is inherently very difficult and very inefficient, right? You want to be strategic about it and not overhire, right? And put your marketing team in the impossible position of having to fill lead flow that they can't fill. They don't have the money. You don't have the brand footprint. Be realistic about capacity when you do this is the other really, really important piece of advice. Will, build on that. I know you probably got
Yeah,
some.
no, your last point was really important. You said, and to fill that lead flow, it may not even exist.
Yeah.
James, it may not even exist. Like the sum may not be even that, right? Unless you've done the work and you understand and you have all of this modern lead scoring process behind it, it may not even exist. And so this is when I was saying earlier, the data and the math and everything else that when you're trying to talk about your growth and everything else that you're going to be accomplishing, this is one of the most powerful tools to have really thoughtful conversations around, what are our actual goals and are those goals truly realistic? And I don't mean realistic like can we close 50%? I mean like does that amount of customers exist? I've been in situations where this year actually, it was this year in January. I did the research for a company and I went to the CEO. It was a husband and wife team, and I went to them and I said, there's no way for you to hit your goal. It does not exist. They were not happy, by the way, with that news. They were not happy with me, but that's my job, is to be a realist in these situations. And I said, there's absolutely stop hiring. This market does not exist the way you think it does. And you know what I use? Technographic information again to figure out like exactly like who the right buyers were, the right type of companies, and really whether the technology that they were going after to be an addendum to was like large enough for them to hit the number that they wanted to. They had overestimated it by like a factor of 3x.
And what that means is you overhire, the capacity's there, you're burning money, right? You're just literally lighting money on fire. So
James,
it's really a balancing
they were
act.
gonna hire they were gonna hire they were gonna hire like 10 salespeople, and I was like, you just literally need two.
Yeah. So I hope that answered the question. Again, really good questions today. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, we don't have any other questions here.
Great.
I want to go back to the offer you made, James, and put here on the screen for everyone. If you want
Okay.
to learn a little bit more about SalesIntel, there is a request a demo with our sponsor button at the top of this page. And also, all those three resources that James mentioned, you can find in our sponsor booth at the top of this page too. So you can get all the information you need. If we don't have any other questions from the audience, I'm going to wrap things up here a little bit. Um, 9 minutes early, but that's good. Audience, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for all your questions. They were really amazing in your participation. You are the best part of MSP for sure. James and Will, thank you so much for all the knowledge you dropped on us today. I took a lot of notes in here, and I have a bunch of good key takeaways to send to the audience later today. As a reminder, audience, you will receive an email from me later today with the recording, some key takeaways, and the resources from this presentation today. Sales Intel, thank you so much for being a partner of MSP. James and Will, we can go hang out backstage and finish this week in a high note. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye. Thank you.